Hi, this is Mashnu, and here is another instructive middle game position. This one was played a long time ago, in 1853 in Brussels, and the player behind the black pieces is the famous Howard Staunton. And in this position it's white to move, and white made actually a very big strategical mistake with this next move. But before I show you this, I would like to tell you that the reason why I've chosen this example is because it shows clearly how tactics and strategic play go together. Actually, we can say that there is almost no game where tactics arise just like that. They're very often the result of certain strategical patterns, and it's very good to understand this, because many people think that if we practice tactics alone we will improve our chess, and on one hand it's true, of course, we will recognize patterns easier and things like that, but on the other hand, if you don't work on your strategic play, then you will never reach those positions where tactics start arising. Well, let me show you this example. White played the move c4 here, which is, from a positional point of view, a weak move because it weakens the square d4. This becomes now a square in hands of black, and also the pawn on d3 is a weakness. This type of pawn moves we see a lot in a lower level of players. Amateurs of low level play this type of moves because they think they have only a very short-term thinking. They think, I advance this pawn, so I attack his queen, and then the queen must move, so I have done something good. But in fact, weaker players don't realize often that we need to think in long terms advantages, long terms weaknesses, because that's actually the main characteristic of strategic play. And here, weakening the square d4 means a long-term characteristic. What black did here was to play the queen to d7, simply retreating the queen. I mean, the pawn structure is not going to change, so there is no need to look right now for things like knight to d4, for example. This type of things, it's just too early for that. Here white should simply take on d4, and after queen takes d4, then bishop takes g4, knight takes g4. There are lots of trades. Of course, still d3 is a bit weak, but see how easily now white finds squares for his pieces. And the main reason why this is a wrong variation is because the general principle says that the player with the least space, the least amount of space, should try to trade pieces. So if we go back here, we can say that black has more space than white. So white doesn't have much space to maneuver his pieces, so it's in white's favor to trade pieces. So with black we shouldn't try to trade pieces here. Let's continue with the game. Queen to d7 was played, and white replied now a3. The idea is clear. He wants to start advancing his queenside pawns, perhaps playing his bishop to b2 to have it on this interesting diagonal there. That's what white wants, and what black wants is to make use of this weak squares on d4 and the weak pawn on d3. And this is the moment when I would like to ask you to pause the video and have a good thought about what you would play here with black. And after a few seconds I'm going to show you the rest of the game. Alright, so I assume that you paused the video and you thought about this position, and the move that was played by Staunton was knight to h5. It's a beautiful move because it's actually showing two things. On one hand, trying to get his knight to this beautiful square f4, where it attacks the undefended piece on e2, it attacks also the pawn on d3, and it has influence on an eventual attack on the king. The other thing that this move does is it opens the option of advancing the f-pawn, controlling e4. Perhaps, I'll go back, perhaps you thought about moving the bishop to f5 with the idea of putting more pressure to d3. Well, bishop f5 doesn't really work because white has knight to e4. So then white brings more pieces into play and opens also the option of placing his bishop on g5, for example, or advancing b4 like it was like he wanted to do. So this bishop f5 is not what we are looking for. After knight h5, white replied b4. Again, you can pause the video and try to find the next move for black. It's not very difficult to find this one, I think. Alright, I suppose that most of you saw this one easily. It's knight to f4. As said before, this is a move that has so many advantages. The first threat, of course, is to take this bishop on e2. And white replied knight to e4. The queen defends the bishop now. The queen on c2. One more time, pause the video and tell me what you would do. Alright, this is the moment when tactics start arising. Black played knight takes e2. Now normally we say that trading a piece, when trading a piece you should trade bad pieces for good pieces, and this is against this rule. Okay, let me go back. This bishop is a very passive bishop and this knight is wonderfully placed, so you would think, why trade these two pieces? It's against this rule of trading a bad piece for a good piece, not a good piece for a bad piece. Well, the idea is that there is a tactical idea here. After knight takes e2, check, queen takes e2. Now we can make use of this pin. Now I'm not going to ask you to pause the video because I'm sure that in a few seconds you see the next move, knight to d4. Attacking the knight on f3, attacking the queen. The only move for white is queen to d1. And now perhaps it's interesting to ask yourself, how would you take now on f3? Would you take with the bishop or would you take with the knight? In the game, black took on f3 with the bishop, and well, actually taking with the knight is also a good move, but with the result of taking with the bishop is very interesting, because after bishop takes f3, white played g takes f3, and now black started dynamically playing with f5. f5, the idea of f5 is actually not only to attack this knight on e4, is actually to bring a possible rook lift, and to, after the knight has moved, continue advancing this pawn so the queen can go to h3. And these two things are the main ingredients for the attack against the white king now. Let me return one move, because here queen to h3 would also have been a very good move, by the way. So if you thought about this move, then it's absolutely a good move. It's actually, well, threatening, of course, knight takes f3 followed by queen takes h2 checkmate. And if white plays now knight to g3, then you can continue with f5 with similar ideas in the game. So this is also working. But let me show you the last moves of the game, because f5 was played, knight to g3, and then, as I told you already, the idea is to advance this pawn even further to f4. Now the knight went back to e4, and here comes queen to h3, threatening knight takes f3. So how to defend this? Well, there is actually only one way to defend one more time this pawn on f3, and that's to play the knight to d2. That's what happened in the game. And the last move of the game is this beautiful rook lift, rook to f5. Actually, rook to f6 would also have been with the same result. Now white is going to be checkmated in a few moves. There is no defense against the two ideas, rook to g5 check followed by queen to g2 checkmate, and the other idea, rook to h5 followed by queen takes h2 checkmate. So in this position white resigned. Alright, I hope that you found this an interesting and instructive example, and I'll say goodbye now, and I'll see you next time on YouTube.